before this story begins, one honest word about the story itself. What you are about to hear is one of the most loved accounts in all the Gospels, and also one of the most debated. It is found in many ancient copies of the Gospel of John, and the Church has read it and trusted it and been shaped by it for many centuries. But it does not appear in the very oldest copies of John that have survived, and many scholars believe it was not part of John's Gospel as he first set it down. What almost no one doubts is that it rings true to Jesus, that this is the kind of thing he did, remembered, and handed down by the people who knew him. So we will tell it the way the Church has always told it, with full conviction. It is not yet fully morning. The light over Jerusalem is still gray, the cool, thin gray of the hour before the sun clears the hills. In a wide stone court, a crowd has gathered, and there is a sound moving through it that you would never want aimed at you. A low murmur. The murmur of people who have already made up their minds. A woman is breathing too fast. There are hands on her arms. She is being pushed forward, half stumbling, across the stone, and the faces turn to watch her come. And near the front of that crowd, a man bends down and picks up a stone from the ground. He weighs it in his palm. His fingers close around it. This is how the morning begins for her. She has been caught, and by the law of her own people, before the sun is fully up, she is going to be dead. But here is the first thing to understand, and it is uglier than it looks. The men who dragged her into that courtyard did not bring her only to kill her. They brought her to use her. There is a teacher in that court this morning, and these men have carried a question to him, a question with a trap folded inside it. And this woman, her life, her shame, her terror, is the bait. She is not, to them, really the point. She is the weapon. Her name is not recorded. We are never told it. She is simply a woman of Jerusalem, caught, exposed, standing in the middle of a ring of people who want her dead. So begin with her, there in the center of that circle. Because most of us, at some point, have stood somewhere like it, accused, exposed, the verdict already decided before a word is spoken in our defense. The question this story asks is the same question she is asking with every fast, shallow breath. When the crowd has already decided, when the law itself is being held over you like a raised hand, from where could mercy possibly come? To understand the trap, you have to back up a few hours into the dark. We are not told how she was caught, and we will not invent it. The gospel is blunt and brief. She was caught in adultery, in the very act. Her wrong is real. This story is not going to pretend otherwise, and neither, as you will see, did Jesus. But watch what happens next, because it happens fast. There is no trial. There is no quiet word, no chance to explain. There are hands in the half-dark, pulling her up, gathering her clothing for her, because there is no time to gather it herself, marching her out of a private room and into a public street. And the streets of Jerusalem are waking up. Doors are opening. A city is beginning its ordinary day, and into that ordinary morning she is paraded. A woman held hard by the arms, hurried along, surrounded by men whose faces are set. People stop. People stare. Some of them fall in behind and follow. The shame begins long before any verdict. The shame, in fact, is half the point. By the time she reaches the temple, a good part of the waking city has seen her face. Where they were taking her and why would have been clear to everyone watching. The law given through Moses was not vague about adultery. It called it a grave wrong, a tearing of something sacred, and it set a grave penalty: death. Death by stoning. And the law carried one particular terrible detail. The witnesses, the very ones who accused, were to throw the first stones. Accusation and execution were meant to be the same hands. You did not get to call for a death and then stand back from it. If you called for the stone, you threw the stone. And here's a detail you are meant to notice. The gospel wants you to notice it. Adultery, by its very definition, is not something one person does alone. The law that commanded death for the woman commanded exactly the same death for the man. Both of them. Every time the same penalty, with no exceptions written in. And yet only the woman was dragged through those streets. Only the woman was pushed into that court. Wherever the man was that morning, no hand was gripping his arm. Understand what that means. To leave the man out was not a small oversight or a loose end. It was, all by itself, a breaking of the very law these men were claiming to defend. They could not even pick up the law of Moses as a weapon without violating it in the act of lifting it. The enforcement was already crooked. These men were not carrying the law. They were carrying a weapon, and they had already chosen which way to point it. There was a reason they were bringing her to this particular courtyard on this particular morning. Because someone was already there. He had come to the temple early, while it was still dim, the way he often did. And the people had come to him, they always came, and he had sat down among them in the ordinary posture of a teacher and begun to teach. There was nothing dramatic in it yet. A man seated on the stone in the early light, a crowd settling in around him, a quiet voice. His name was Jesus. And the men marching the woman through the streets knew exactly where to find him, because the question they were carrying was not really about the woman at all. It was about him, and it had been built with real care to leave him no safe answer. If this teacher said, yes, stone her, the law is the law. Then he was finished as the man who welcomed the poor, the outcast, the sinner. And worse, he had just publicly ordered an execution, and the Romans who occupied Jerusalem had largely taken the power of the death penalty out of Jewish hands. He would be a rabbi inciting an unlawful killing. Rome would want him. But if he said, no, let her go, show her mercy, then he had just stood up in the temple in front of everyone and set aside the law of Moses. He would be a teacher who could not be trusted with the very scripture he claimed to honor. The religious authorities would have him. 2 jaws. Stone her and lose to Rome. Free her and lose to the law. There was no third answer, and that is exactly what a trap is. And the woman shaking in the middle of the circle was the hinge the whole thing turned on. So they came through the crowd, the scribes and the Pharisees, and it is worth slowing down on who they were, because it is easy to turn them into cartoons, and they were not cartoons. They were respected men, religious men, men who had given their lives to the study of Scripture and the keeping of it. Some of them that morning may genuinely have believed they were doing a righteous thing. That is the unsettling part. Cruelty does not always arrive sneering. Sometimes it arrives wearing the faces of decent, certain, important men who are entirely sure they are right. They pushed the woman ahead of them, through the gathered people, until they reached the front. And then they did the cruelest small thing in the whole account. They stood her up in the middle, in the midst of them all. They did not let her stand at the edge, or half hidden behind anyone. They set her in the dead center of the circle, alone, with every single eye in that courtyard fixed on her. Try for just a moment to stand where she was standing. The light is growing. She can feel every face. She is aware of her own breathing and cannot slow it down. There is a strange, floating unreality to it. The mind does that, under enough fear. It lifts a little out of the body and watches from just behind itself. She is seeing the stone walls, the sky going pale, the dust on the ground, and some quiet, calm voice inside her is saying that this is the last morning, that she will not see the sky again, that it ends here, on these stones, in front of all these people. And then the men around her began to speak, not to her, about her. They spoke past her to the teacher seated on the ground. "Teacher," they said, "this woman was caught in adultery in the very act." They let that hang in the air. And then the question, the real one, the trap with its catch filed sharp. "Now in our law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What then do you say about her?" "What do you say?" The courtyard went still. This is the silence to feel. Every person there understood that something had just been set down in front of this teacher that he could not simply step around. The accusers understood it best of all. The gospel tells us plainly that they asked the question that they might have something to accuse him of. They were not waiting for wisdom. They were waiting for a mistake. They believed they had him. And the woman understood none of the legal machinery, but she did not need to. She could feel the trap close because she could feel every face in that courtyard turn away from her and toward the man on the ground. And the man on the ground did not answer. He did not stand up. He did not argue. He did not perform for the crowd. He bent down, lower than he already was, and he began to write on the ground with his finger. We are not told what he wrote. Let that be said clearly, and then left alone. People have guessed at it for 2,000 years. The gospel simply does not say, and a story that means to be honest should not pretend to know what it does not know. He wrote something in the dust. The one thing we can be sure of is what it did to that morning. It slowed everything down. The accusers had built a fast trap. It needed a fast answer, a hot answer, an answer snatched in the heat of the crowd. And instead, the teacher knelt in the dirt and quietly wrote, and the silence stretched, and all that heat had nowhere to go. They did not like that. They pressed him. They asked again. Louder now, the question repeated, the demand sharpening in their mouths. And the woman, who had braced herself for the worst, watched this. She had been handled by hard and certain men all morning. And here, in the middle of it, was a man who would not be hurried, who would not raise his voice, who had knelt down in the dust between her and the crowd. She did not understand it yet, but something in her had begun, very slightly, to listen. And then, Jesus stood up. When he finally rose and spoke, he did not give a speech. He did not defend the woman point by point. He did not attack the men. He said one sentence. One. And it did not go where anyone in that courtyard expected it to go. He looked at them, at the men holding the stones, at the certain faces, at the whole ring of accusers. And he said, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw the first stone at her." And then he bent back down and went on writing in the dust. Hear what he did and what he did not do. He did not say the woman was innocent. She was not, and he would not lie. He did not say the law was wrong, or that adultery did not matter, or that the sacred thing she had broken was not sacred. He did not strike out one word of Moses, but he did something to the law that the accusers had never seen coming. They had picked it up as a weapon, to be swung at other people, and Jesus quietly turned it in their hands and held it up as a mirror. Throw the stone, yes, the law allows it, but the law also says the witnesses throw first, the accuser's own hands. So, let the man among you with clean hands begin. Let the one with no sin of his own be the first this morning to take up a stone and end a life. Go on. He is not stopping anyone. He is only asking that the law be kept all the way down, including the part of it that turns and looks back at the one holding the stone. And then he looked down again at the dust and left them alone with that. That is the genius and the mercy of it together. He did not stand there and shame them to their faces. He looked away. He gave them the one thing a cornered, exposed person most needs and most rarely gets. He gave them the privacy to do the right thing. And in the silence, something began to happen at the edges of the circle. The gospel describes it with great care, and the detail it chooses is almost unbearably human. It says that those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out, one by one, beginning from the oldest, even to the last. The oldest first. Think about why. The oldest man in that crowd was the man with the most mornings behind him, the most words he wished he could call back, the most failures, carried the longest, known the best, the ones he had finally run out of ways to lie to himself about. When the teacher said, "Let the one without sin begin," it was the old man who felt the full weight of it first, simply because he had been given the most years in which to learn the truth about himself. And so it was an old man's hand that opened first, an old man's stone that dropped into the dust, an old man who turned and walked away, and then another, and then another. Not in a rush, not in a scene. The gospel does not describe shouting or argument. It describes something quieter and far more devastating. A circle of men, each one looking honestly at himself for a moment, and each one honestly setting his stone down. One by one. The dull sound of stone after stone falling into the dirt. Footsteps. The crowd thinning. The trap that had been built so carefully simply coming apart in their hands, because not one of them, not the youngest, and certainly not the oldest, could honestly claim the clean hands the law required. And the woman stood in the middle of it, with her eyes shut. She had been waiting for the first stone. Everyone who has ever braced for a blow knows the particular, awful arithmetic of it. The listening, the waiting, the body clenched around the certainty that it is coming now, now, now. She was standing inside that, and what she heard was not what she had braced for. She did not hear stones striking. She heard stones falling, dropping, not thrown, and she heard footsteps, and the footsteps were going away from her. When she finally opened her eyes, the courtyard had emptied. The men were gone. The accusers were gone. The trap was gone. The stones were lying in the dust where they had been set down, every one of them unthrown, and one person was still there. Jesus straightened up, and for the first time in that entire morning, someone looked at the woman and spoke to her. Not about her, not over her, not using her, to her. He asked her two simple questions, and they were gentle ones. "Woman, where are your accusers? Did no one condemn you?" She answered him, and here is something easy to miss. This is the only moment in the whole account where she speaks. All morning she has been described, accused, displayed, argued over, and never once addressed. Now, finally asked a direct and gentle question, she says the only words the gospel ever gives her. Two of them. "No one, Lord. No one." The circle that had been so certain, so unanimous, so ready. And now there was no one left standing in it to condemn her. And Jesus said to her, "Neither do I condemn you." Stay on that sentence, because it is the center of everything. Of every person who had stood in that courtyard at dawn, there was exactly one who could honestly have picked up a stone. One man with clean hands. One person there truly without sin. The only one in all of Jerusalem with the actual right to condemn this woman was the one kneeling in the dust who refused to. Neither do I condemn you. The accusers, who had no right to judge her, had all walked away, and the one who did have the right would not use it. But he was not finished, and the rest of his sentence matters every bit as much as the first half, because mercy that is real is never the same thing as pretending. He said, "Go your way. From now on, sin no more." Hear both halves of that. He did not tell her that what she had done was nothing. He did not tell her there had been no wrong here. The word sin is right there in his sentence to her. He names it plainly, exactly as plainly as he had refused to lie about it all morning long. What he did was take the thing that had been used to destroy her, the truth of her wrong, and set it down behind her instead of holding it over her. He did not excuse her past. He gave her a future. Go your way. She had one now, a road out of that courtyard and a life on the far side of that morning, which an hour before she had not had. From now on, there was going to be a from now on. Go and live it, and leave this behind. That is mercy, the real thing. Not a shrug, not, it does not matter. Mercy looks the wrong full in the face and calls it by its true name, and then refuses to let it be the last word spoken about the person. We are not told what she did with the rest of her life. The gospel lets her walk out of the frame, and does not follow her, and we will respect that silence. But think of what she carried out of that courtyard with her. She had walked in, dragged, bent, gripped by the arms, certain to the bone that she would be dead before noon. She walked out under her own power, into a morning that had somehow turned full and warm and ordinary again. The sun all the way up now over a city that had condemned her and a law that had cornered her. And behind her, in the dust, a scattered circle of stones that no one had thrown. Somewhere in her, as her feet found the road, there must have been a single thought, too large to hold. I was going to die this morning, and I am going to live. And the one person who could have stopped that did not. So what do you take from a morning like this one? Here is one thing. Almost everyone, somewhere, has stood where she stood, in the middle of some circle, exposed, the verdict already in, certain that the worst thing about you has now become the only thing anyone will ever see. If that is you, or if it has ever been you, then hear what this morning says. The crowd is not the final voice. The crowd is loud, and the crowd is certain, and the crowd is very often wrong about where mercy can come from. It came, that day, from the one place no one in the courtyard was watching, from the only person with the right to throw, kneeling in the dirt instead. And here is the other thing, the harder one, because almost all of us have also stood in the other place. We have been somewhere in that ring, with a stone in our hand, very sure of someone else's sin, and very quiet about our own. And the same sentence that emptied the circle reaches us there too. The one without sin goes first. It is not a sentence meant to crush us. It is an invitation to open the hand, to let the stone fall, and to become, for other people, what we so desperately need someone to be for us. The accusers had demanded to know where the law landed. The answer was a man kneeling in the dust, writing something no one will ever read, refusing to let the most sacred words his people owned be sharpened into a knife. When the law was made into a trap, mercy came, and it did not come by pretending the wrong away. It came from a hand that had every right to close around a stone, opening instead, and letting it fall. And one last word, so this is not misheard. That Jesus did not condemn her that morning is not the same as saying that nothing is ever judged. The same Gospels that tell this story tell us, just as plainly, that this same Jesus is the true and final judge of every life. What happened in that courtyard was not the end of all judgment. It was judgment held back, on purpose, to leave a guilty person room and time and a road to go and become someone new. Mercy did not cancel the reckoning. Mercy made space before it. The courtyard is empty now. The sun is high. The dust is bright. And scattered across the stone where decent and certain men set them down and walked away, the stones are lying still, every one of them unthrown. And a woman who came in with the morning gray, condemned, is walking out into the full warm light of it,